I'm Rachel. I'm a fourth-year student at WBA. I'm a music major. Prior to coming to university, I had classical training in French horn and piano. And last semester, I had the opportunity to be in Professor Moss's seminar and just learned a lot of things that I didn't really know how to do with music, especially music therapy. So I wrote a paper on it, and I'm just going to share some of my reflections with you. This is called Self-Healing with Music Therapy. Since I seldom imagine music apart from performance in educational settings like concert halls and classrooms, the second phase of music and consciousness was especially enlightening for me. At each class, I was often adventuring into unexplored territory, which was particularly true to our extended discussion of music therapy. Though I anticipated confronting an impersonal survey of an unfamiliar practice, I found myself not only gaining a deeper understanding of its varying procedures, but also a greater awe of the human potential for creativity. Specifically, I was extremely intrigued by the functionality of music in therapy. While I expected the systematization of music to demean creativity, I found music therapy achieving an opposite effect. From my perspective, music therapy enabled patients to self-heal by awakening a latent creativity that overcame the life-impending traumas and insecurities. With my limited exposure to music therapy, I entered the seminar with an assumptive and factually uninformed perspective. Because of the practice's name, I subconsciously overemphasized the role of the therapist while failing to acknowledge the importance of the patient. In the way I viewed a surgeon's relationship with his patients, so I understood the dynamic between the music therapists and their patients. The therapists operated on the submissive patients. Tangled up in the medical association, I narrowly viewed music therapy as an artistic variation of rehabilitation. When the helpless patients sought relief, the therapist simply prescribed music as their choice of remedy. After learning the basics of music therapy, I was fascinated by the effective cross between music and medicine. However, this systematic procedure of therapists treating their patients with music was unsettling for me. Up until that point, I had always admired music for its ability to stay separate from functionality. Its orientation towards creativity and aesthetics made it distinctive. But in the context of therapy, music seemed to be for use, manipulated for the sake of medicine. With time, my perspective began to shift. Through reading the various cases and interacting with our guest lecturers in class, I began to reformulate the role of the therapist, recognize the role of patients, and thus uncover a beautiful marriage between science and art. I realized that, though vital to the healing process, the therapists were not capable of forcing their patients to heal through music, and the mere sound of music was not the magical cure, but rather a catalyst for positive change within the cooperative patients. Perhaps in many medical contexts, patients are often helpless and dependent on professional care. However, patients in music therapy balance both their dependence on the therapist for guidance and their important responsibility to respond internally to music. As they react to and interact with music, patients actively participate in and even pioneer the recovery process. In Receptive Methods of Music Therapy, for example, Denise Grauke and Tony Wigram described how therapists use music listening to evoke and support imaginal processes or inner experiences in their patients. Although I initially overlooked this simple statement, I later noticed that patients' autonomy and creativity been involved in the process. While the therapist provided the proper music and facilitation throughout the session, patients were called to imagine and summon their own visualizations. And although creativity is often reduced to tangible productions and compositions, the process previously quoted is undoubtedly contingent on the patient's creativity. As the music sounded, it evoked and supported the internally existent, whether it was a memory from the past, an image of nature, or another creative response. When therapists conducted the sessions through music and verbal guidance, the subsequent step was not immediate healing, but rather a response from the patients. In essence, the therapist did not heal, but instead breathed life into the patient's latent creative reserves. Consequently, I began to admire the therapy patients, particularly those described in the case readings. To me, they were unsung artists, and they made music therapy stand out from other rehabilitation processes. Beyond their triumphant recoveries, the patients enriched my perception of people through their candidness and humility. During the session, they articulated vivid visions, recollections, and images. Their subconscious insights were surely more imaginative than they realized, a situation in itself that exudes meekness and beauty. This posture of self-forgetfulness was also evident during our in-class meditation exercises. In each post-meditation discussion, my peers consistently explained radically imaginative responses. From images of dynamic visions to out-of-body experiences, each person exhibited immense creativity. Moreover, it was enjoyable to see my peers surprised by their own thoughts and excited to discover the extent of their artistic potentials. At first glance, music therapy appeared to be a simple and artistic spin on traditional therapy. But by embracing the entire music therapy process instead of only the results, I found that it irradiated an incomparable beauty. The combination of music and therapy did not merely achieve healing, but it also created a fresh and synergistic experience. As therapists invited music to speak into the ineffability of their vulnerable patients' pains and insecurities, creativity burst through the patient's subconscious. And with the autonomy to respond, the patients demonstrated extreme power in their weakness, a creative strength of a self-inspired peace with the past, and a confident outlook on the future.